I had access to OpenAI's models before ChatGPT had come out, and I was playing with, I think at the time, 3.0, or maybe even they got out 3.5 before ChatGPT into their playground environment. I just acutely remember sitting next to my mom on the couch, like playing with the model in their playground, and just looking at her and saying, like, whatever this is this is the internet all over again.
Welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. You've got Logan Jones here today, and interesting special interview because Evan is serving both as a co-host, but more so as a guest of this podcast. So we are talking with Evan and his co-founder of Valent, Ryan Rudd. So if you have been following us for a while, you might have remembered Evan talking about a new company he was starting. I believe this was at the beginning of season 7, so almost a year and a half ago. Was when Evan first started working on the concept of this idea. This company is now raised venture capital, has paying customers, and is a pretty incredible company. So Valent is, I'm going to read this straight from the website, helping companies make smarter, faster, revenue-generating decisions using AI. So they are building a collaborative AI platform that helps structure unstructured data that exists in things like RFPs. So RFP stands for Request for Proposal. That's where a lot of the revenue sits behind for very large projects. So any projects that have to do with the government, large enterprise SaaS contracts, large engineering projects. Usually companies have to respond to an RFP and generate a proposal to win that revenue. So Evan's company is helping to accelerate the response process to RFPs using AI, and they've built a truly incredible company. A couple of things I want to state at the beginning here, just for full disclosure, I am an angel investor in the company. That does give me a pretty unique perspective on what they've built and the entire process of them building it. So as I've mentioned, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of this season's first episode. Not only am I good friends and co-hosts with Evan, I'm also his roommate. So I've lived with him the entire time as they've had this idea and built it into an MVP and now into a full business. As soon as I saw this idea start to take shape, I knew that it was something that I really wanted to get behind Evan and support. A lot of times when you're making investments, you're not necessarily supporting the business or the idea, but the person. There's no one I would rather put my money behind than Evan Knowles. So very excited to dig deep into this business. We talk about everything that they built so far, their process for building it. If you're an entrepreneur that's building in the AI space or just an entrepreneur in general, this is full of really great learnings and takeaways from Evan and Ryan. So before getting into the episode, I just want to get a quick word from our sponsors and appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. Before highlighting our sponsors, we'd just like to state that the views and content shared on this platform do not necessarily reflect those of our show sponsors. Middle Tech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation exists to support and develop Kentucky's startup ecosystem, and we are proud to be supported by an organization whose mission aligns so closely with ours. If you're a founder building in Kentucky, you need to check out the resources that KY Innovation has to offer. You can find more information by clicking the link in our show notes or going to kyinnovation.com. Before we dive too deep into Valent, I would love to just start by going over a high-level overview of what you guys have built and then jumping into the problem that you guys are addressing. So can you just start us there, Evan?
Yeah, so Valent is building a collaborative AI platform for teams that generate revenue through very document-driven processes. So RFPs, RFQs, RFIs, large portions of our economy are driven through RFPs, for instance. All government spending goes through RFPs up to a certain level, which is pretty much 99, very large percentage of government spending goes through RFPs. Engineering services, IT, mission critical, very large infrastructure all goes through document-driven processes that are very large documents that require many stakeholders and subject matter experts to chime in on those documents and generate more documents in the form of proposals. And AI is really well positioned to ingest those documents, extract what's needed to respond, and then help draft responses very quickly using old content. And that's the acute problem we're solving, is that workflow is very, very time consuming and expensive for businesses today. and it slows them down from their growth, but also as an economy, I think we're being held back by very bureaucratic, document-heavy processes, and so our job is to try to come in to these industries and streamline how projects, are started, bid on, and won.
And so can you explain why the RFP process is necessary in the first place? Like, why do all these companies have to go through that process to win that revenue? What type of projects typically sit behind those sorts of processes?
Well, when it's like a really mission-critical project, like a bridge or a jet engine, or IT and enterprise software systems that run entire airports or departments of the government and agencies. There are so many requirements and technical specifications and necessities that need to be established up front to know if a vendor is the right fit. And so that requires, again, very large documents to lay out very specifically what needs to be accomplished, what the requirements are, the specifications that need to be met, and the process needs to be very well outlined so that the people that are bidding are qualified, are submitting great proposals, and can communicate effectively what needs to be delivered and how they deliver it. And it also comes back to competition. I think as a country and as a business, you would want the most important parts of what make your operation or organization run to be bid on competitively. And by submitting these things out as an RFP or an RFQ or an RFI, you're gathering competitive intel, and it helps you inform the decision of who's the best fit for our company. So, this process will never go away. The format of it and the form function and the way it's done will change because of AI, but the process can never go away. It's just not something that is possible. So those are the two things. It's making sure the right fit is there, and to have a competitive process so you're picking, again, the best vendor.
Well, we'll definitely dig more into that problem and your all's approach to solving it in the software you guys have built. Would love to dive into kind of the architecture of it, because I don't think it's terribly difficult to understand, but I think it's a very new way of building software and using this new technology that's become available to us. But I want to take us all the way back to the inception of the idea, it's been very interesting to kind of follow this from its inception, because obviously we've been friends for a long time. We've been doing Middle Tech together for a long time. You built Simba, and Simba was your first kind of real crack at your own startup. You're using AI a lot when building Simba. So I know that was kind of the origin of this idea. Take us from there, how the idea originated, and I want to dig into, with you, Ryan, how you guys started bringing on design pilots to help you kind of get to where it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I had access to OpenAI's models before ChatGPT had come out, and I was playing with, I think at the time, 3.0, or maybe even they got out 3.5 before ChatGPT into their playground environment. I just acutely remember sitting next to my mom on the couch, like playing with the model in their playground, and just looking at her and saying, like, whatever this is this is the internet all over again. I can acutely remember telling her that. And essentially the experience I had was I was having a conversation with a computer, and it was hard to distinguish the difference between a human and what I was interacting with. I mean, 3.5 was, in today's terms, terrible. It's a bad experience considered what we're used to today, but at that time it was good enough for me to be able to tell this is a big deal. And so I had already been tracking OpenAI because Elon Musk made an early angel investment, and that was on Twitter, and so I started following them and the announcement they were making out of their research. And for instance, when 2.0 dropped and they released some research on X or Twitter at that time, like, I had been following them, but I had no idea what they were building. I just couldn't really wrap my head around it until I played with it. And so when ChatGPT launched, that day I got everybody licenses, and we used it across as many workflows as we could just to discover use cases. And we were using it on website copy, marketing copy, sales copy. It's the majority of the use cases at that point was just iterating on copy and brainstorming. It wasn't even good at brainstorming yet necessarily, but it was just like, here's a header on our website, give me 5 more versions. So we were using it for all kinds of things. And then the first pain point I noticed that was just very obvious was, okay, everybody's got their own chat. This is a really unique, cool experience. And if everybody has their own chat and we're trying to do something that needs to be collaborative, that's a problem. And you have several people having different conversations with different contexts about the same project or the same company, and you have silos, and that introduces, not only business risk, but just workflow problems. And I was still building Simba at the time, so I just kind of kept using it, kept in the back of my head that use case and that pain point, and started to track the market and just noticed nobody was going after it still. And so when we sold Simba and I had gone on and, done the whole sabbatical and traveled and healed after that, failed, attempt, but the exit nonetheless, I came back after that, and I think even before I left for my last trip to Asia, I said, "Hey Ryan, I've got an idea. Let's go to lunch." I don't think I teed it up at all. I think I maybe just asked him straight up to lunch. And I had met Ryan from Simba when a person from our team left the Simba team, and I reached out to Ryan to comb through our code base and just kind of give me, lay the land. Hey, how do things look? Where should we go from there? And working with him was good there. But the first thing I noticed in just interacting with him, because we had gotten coffee, and maybe he can tell that story, but just how brilliant he was. You can just kind of tell when somebody's smart, at least I can tell with a lot of people. And so it's just like I could tell he's just a great developer from the get-go. And so when this idea came, I was just like, hey, let's get some lunch. I've got a concept. Let's talk about it. And then I laid it out. And so that's kind of, the story up to that point.
And the concept at the time was you wanted to try and build a collaborative AI platform to help businesses make decisions. That was kind of what it originally started as. I remember when you first started talking about it, I think your thesis around it was something along the lines of decisions are kind of like the atomic unit of businesses. Like good decisions comprise a good business. And so that was essentially what you guys had first built. Before we get into the story of your interaction with Evan and kind of first meeting him and building the initial version of the product, I want to know, so you originally called the company Devise. It's now Valent. Would love to just know where the name Valent came from, what that name means.
As ChatGPT output, I knew what I wanted the name to mean. And I literally went to ChatGPT and backing up, when we decided we weren't going to use Devise, one, nobody knew how the hell to spell Devise. And two, there was copyright or a trademark infringement possibility with that. So if we were to grow, there'd be a risk to the business. And so we just decided before we even launched the company, let's rename it. And so Valent, I knew I wanted it to encapsulate this idea of data being used to help businesses make decisions. And I typed into ChatGPT what terms within the chemistry world means atoms bonding. And literally definition of valent is an atom's ability to bond with other atoms to create a stronger compound. And the output at that time was covalent. And I just kind of messed around with it. And so, ChatGPT.
Love it. Thinking
I'm
partner.
an AI native guy.
Heck yeah. That's great. Ryan, take us back to that initial lunch. Can you just kind of walk us through where you were in your career, what you were doing? Did you think that you wanted to be joining a startup soon or be working on a project? Just kind of bring us back to that point in your life.
Yeah. I would say it wasn't really planned. I'd always kind of tinkered a bit, probably done more like indie hacker projects, not really in the startup world. But, I was at my job working, pretty happy, but then had talked to Evan, and he had, I think had just briefly mentioned LLMs, and I wasn't even super familiar at the time. This was probably back in the very early, maybe spring 2023, and when he just kind of casually mentioned it. And when I'd first seen them, I'd kind of written them off. Wasn't very exciting because they weren't very good at the time. But then around that time is when all these breakthroughs were happening, and I tried them out again, and I was like, oh wow, this is something very different.
And what was your job at the time? What were you doing? What company were you working?
I worked at Samtech out of New Albany, Indiana. They're an electronics parts manufacturer, basically.
Interesting. And so when Evan came to you and started talking about this initial idea, like I mentioned, I think his thesis was originally needs to be like a collaborative AI platform that is helping make decisions. Like what caught your attention about the idea, or even about Evan as somebody you might want to work with originally? Yeah. I think that's just helpful as people are listening to it and thinking, I might want to be a co-founder. Like what were the green flags that you saw?
Yeah. For one, like you said, we had kind of worked together in a limited capacity, but to some degree when he was doing Simba. So I was familiar with him from that. But then the main thing that caught my eye was, I guess, when we went to lunch, we sit down and he immediately starts kind of laying out this vision that he had for, he explained what you mentioned, like the decision room as or a decision as an atomic unit of a business. And then really how AI wasn't just going to be this, this just new way of using software, but a fundamentally new layer in the stack of a business. And what he was saying, like a cognition layer, was kind of the way he explained it. And it's this, with all these new capabilities, we have the ability to harness all this context and knowledge that maybe was just not usable before. And so that cognition layer is really, the premise of it was that it can now capture and be utilized for all sorts of different use cases.
Very cool. And it sounds like the shortened answer to how would you meet somebody like Ryan? And I can remember when you first met him and you immediately knew he was somebody that could be a brilliant co-founder for you. It sounds like it was just through networks. It was through your developers of Simba that you got introduced and kind of brought them into the fold and built a relationship from there. But just to try and extract, if somebody has an idea and they're trying to meet potential co-founders, how do they go about doing that? I don't know if you have any advice off of the back of that, but
you just got to get active. It was Middle Tech. He moved here from Louisville and wanted to meet people and found Middle Tech and reached out to me.
I didn't know that.
Which,
that's cool.
A lot of my friends and a lot of people that I work with now that came to me because of Middle Tech or because of Develop Lex.
Yeah, creating content.
So you just have to be in the arena. He probably saw that I was starting companies, joining early stage companies. He had some concept of that. I let him speak for himself, but I remember he just said, "Hey, I moved here from Louisville. Let's talk. I like Middle Tech." And then we got coffee at Cup of Commonwealth, I think. And then, again, I saw we have the same wavelength of personality, and so I just understood talking to somebody that is very similar to me.
Yeah.
Not that I'm brilliant as Ryan, but our mannerisms and just that. But also I could tell that he was smart just because of the way he communicated what he did.
For sure. Well, I think one of the most critical parts when you're setting out to try and build something is the team that you put around you, especially in those early days. It's critical. And one of the things that I know you're very proud of with Valent is the team that you managed to build. So it's you two are the co-founders, you and Ryan right now, along with Randy, who is one of your senior developers, and Luke, who is, would you call him a front-end / product designer, kind of a mix of the two?
Yep.
Walk us through brag on your team a little bit. You built an incredible team. Talk about Randy and Luke, how you found them, and then I want to get into how you guys are using AI because you guys are a small, lean team that is just moving at breakneck speed right now.
Yeah, it's again networking, being in the arena. I think with Randy, or Luke came first, and so Luke came from one of our advisors, Chris Davis, who I met through Simba. Chris Davis is brilliant designer. He's been at Stripe, designed significant systems at Atlassian, been a head of design at Atlassian. So I reached out to him when I was doing Simba, and he actually introduced me to my last co-founder. So I went back to Chris and said, "Hey, we're doing it again. I need some more talent to help on the design and development side." And the first person he introduced us to was Luke. At first, we were skeptical of Luke because he was fresh out of college and he was young, and we were just we would love to run really fast and find someone experienced. But when we started interviewing Luke, it was very apparent, he's a stud. He just immediately went after with the opportunity with everything he had. He threw up a landing page for his services on the fly in a weekend. He interviewed a bunch of people that were responding to RFPs that he happened to know, and was like, "Hey, I'm going to build a Notion." He built a whole Notion environment about Devise at the time, and now Valent, and
He created basically a whole slideshow presentation showing us the RFP market and all this, basically off of only an initial conversation with us.
Yeah.
Do you feel like he just understood the idea immediately, and it sounds like he just got super excited about it and just went at it? Was it just he got it? Do you see it super early?
Well, it was a combination of it came from Chris, who was one of his mentors that at the time he really was trying to find an opportunity through, and trusted Chris and his suggestions of bringing him the right opportunity. So there was that, but also he's just really hungry. I think he's got a really unique story of somebody that went to college for one thing, which was design and fine art at the University of Louisville, and then he got out and he's doing graphic design and kind of helping, companies with, design here and there, and he fell into product design. And he's like, I like product design a lot, but I want to take the next step and build it. So he's self-taught himself how to code, and he's like a great, coder, and combine that with some of these AI tools, and he's just like an absolute stud, and just a rare talent. And his main thing is just to bias to action. Like he just like showed us in that first interview, you don't need experience, you just need somebody that's going to get it done. And he has been like just a crazy, crazy good talent to have on the team early, because it's so rare to have a designer and a developer on the front end. Like that's one of the rarest talents you can have, I feel like, in the tech community. And he has both, and he's good at it, and he's still learning, and very hungry to learn. So it's in an early stage, very valuable piece. And then Randy, I've known Randy for a few years now. He was one of the early builders of Avail, which I was at. He was the CTO, and then we met shortly after I left Avail. So we actually met 3-4 years ago and just stayed in touch. Again, I knew he was a very talented developer. He left for New York City. He was in New York City building as a senior staff engineer, which is a super senior role within a very large public company at Square, the website builder in New York. And he moved back. When he moved back, I immediately approached him and said, hey, I'm working on this. And it took him maybe 3, 4, 5 months of just convincing and working closely with us, me and Ryan, and his brother responded to a lot of RFPs and confirmed it was a big problem. And so eventually Randy, he was in retirement. He obviously did very well in New York City, and moving from New York City to Kentucky during COVID, making as much, he basically was retired and not working. And so he was like, I was bored, and you came to me at the right time. And so he joined, and he's crushing it. He's just ridiculously experienced, from IBM to co-founding, multiple companies, having an exit, and then going to Squarespace just to work at a very large business and moving back, So that early, founding team, between the four of us is great. It's just me and 3 developers, which right now is super fun, but we're starting to scale, and so.
Yeah, it's super impressive that you managed to build that team here in Lexington, Kentucky. I know Luke commutes back and forth from Louisville, but being able to have everyone here in the office and have that much talent concentrated in that office together is incredible. And I've been lucky enough to be able to sit and bum some office space off of you guys as I go full time on Middle Tech and Develop Lex, and just being around you guys, it's got the startup energy. The other fun thing is this office is the most startup office you could imagine. We're literally recording this at a table that used to be a door. It's nothing fancy. It's what it should be. But Ryan, I wanted to dig into this part a little bit with you. You guys, as Evan just mentioned, 3 developers and Evan. Small team, but you guys have built an incredible product so far, and you're moving very, very quickly. You're able to incorporate feedback from some of these design pilots that you guys have done. Just talk about this kind of moment in history as a developer, having access to these tools. What does it mean for the profession of developers and starting companies? Just kind of give us an idea of what it's like building a product right now.
Yeah, I think even over the last probably less than a year, it's accelerated even more, but I think it's completely changed the game, really. In terms of the amount that you can get out of a small team is just, it's got to be exponentially more if you really learn how to adapt to the tools and use them properly.
What tools are you using?
Today, we all use Cursor. I would say that's the main one. In the early days, it was GitHub Copilot, which was okay, and I think we basically ended up abandoning it at one point and kind of gave up on it for a little bit.
Yep.
And then discovered Cursor when they were still pretty early at the time. And that was just a game changer, even with the earlier models that weren't even that great yet. But that really took it. So that was Luke and I were just like, wow, this is next level. We were already moving pretty fast, but now this is just ridiculous speed. And then it's funny, the story of Randy, coming onto the team. He saw us using the tools, but didn't really get it at first. Was maybe a little bit hesitant to get into them.
Skeptical, even.
Yeah, and maybe they help, but I don't really need them. And then it was maybe after a month or so, we finally convinced him and poked him enough and he tried it, and it was immediately wow,
oh, shit.
this is a complete game changer. And now he's a giant advocate for it. Like,
There's no going back, he says.
yeah,
super
no
cool.
going back.
And so I'm trying to decide if I want to get into the design pilots first. I think what I want to touch on before that is, can you tell me your current code base now? Like, how much of the code is it helping you write? How much of the code is AI generated at this point?
Yeah, it's tough to say. Depends on which tools you're talking about. If you're like even just the advancements in like auto completion stuff, how much better they can be with LLMs. If you're counting that, I mean, very
Sure.
significant amount, like over half. But really, I would say the amount of just like boilerplate and things that like the menial tasks that it can just take off your plate, especially now in even just the past couple months, these new like more agentic focused use cases that Cursor's gotten way better with, probably unlock even more of that for us and for everyone else.
Well, I had on the sales side, I mean, even today I showed you the workflow. It's like, between deep research, Clay, which is a go-to-market tool, and even using our own app, it's like I can go from dropping in a website with, hundreds of articles because it's a media site and saying, scrape this entire site of every company that mentions they sell to the government, extract their name, their website, and then I take that and I run it through, another AI agent that gets me, all of the contacts that I could want in each company that matches our ICP and their email and their phone number.
Yep.
And that takes me 30 minutes to get 400 contacts. That would have taken somebody 2 weeks, 2 years ago. And another thing we do is, I'm running every one of my sales calls through AI and structuring the data in our product so I can get all the pain points, all the feedback and objections, all of the technologies people are using. And I now have, all of that in structured format for me to go through and talk with the development team on, hey, here's all of the valuable information coming from our calls. 2 years ago, that kind of intelligence is not possible. Having it structured output like that. Summarization is one thing, but taking structured output and taking action on it is where this is moving, and we're trying to move the company. And so whether it's engineering or sales, I think the definition of an AI first is just whenever you have a task, put it in AI. And then if it doesn't work, then you do it manually.
I want to make sure we revisit that when we talk more about the platform play of Valent and how you guys are helping structure unstructured data, as you guys have called it. But before we get there, I want to talk, we talked about the team. I want to talk about your advisors and the people that are supporting you and making introductions and helping guide this process of building this early stage company. Walk us through who your advisors are and your process for finding them, how they've helped you to this point. Just kind of give us some insight into that side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two pivotal people that I'll touch on that open the door to others. John Wilmoth, I think, is the first that definitely needs to be mentioned. When Ryan and I had the idea, John was the first person I told from a perspective of an investor. I didn't even look at him as an investor at that point. He's just somebody that has been in the game a long time, has seen a lot of early stage companies, and I wanted him to know as much as possible early, not even from a hope that he would invest one day, but just, I'm just a big believer that there's always people farther along than you and smarter than you that you better align with them early, because you're going to come across situations that you've never been in before. And the more people you have in your circle that are way further than you, the faster you're going to move. And so John was just one of those people for his own knowledge, but also his network. And so when I approached John, we were way too early stage for any kind of investment, but he opened up his network to me. And I knew John prior to starting Valent, but he brought people like Doug Smith to the table, Mike Davis, who multi-billion-dollar exit with Appriss. Doug Smith is GM of North America for Microsoft, so he's one of the most senior people at Microsoft. He's from Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Went to the University of Kentucky. He's from my hometown. It's just like,
I didn't realize he went to UK too. That's awesome.
And so John opened his network, and all those people angel invested, and so they now have skin in the game. And then eventually, John came on board when he saw our progression, the market we decided to go after, and the use case and the pain point. John jumped on it, and then he brought other people to the table. And then the other person is Brian Fox, who I was networking. I met with George Ward over at University of Kentucky, And I said, hey, here's what we're doing. And he said, you need to meet Brian Fox. He's an absolute animal when it comes to networking in this industry. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. It's just so crazy. This guy is everything he could be described as by George Ward. He's an animal when it comes to just networking and knowing an industry and relationships. He's just the most relationship-driven person I've ever met. I've learned so much from him. He's just like, a brilliant networker. And he's, doing sales at one of the largest, companies in the IT space for many years. And he's developed a network that, I don't know, it's unrivaled. And he immediately just walked us into so many doors from a sales perspective, from a growth perspective, an advisory perspective. Our first several customers are from him. He has very deep ties. He's from the DC and Annapolis area. He's got 15 siblings that are all in the government contracting
15
space.
siblings. I feel like that needs to be underlined.
Yeah. His email is like bfox of, whatever, 9 of 16. And his whole family is from DC, and many of them are still there. And like every single one of them is in very senior positions within the, DOD and government, contracting space. And so he obviously understands it very well. But when he came on board as an advisor, when I realized, his knowledge and network, things, shifted. So I think as an early stage founder, the people you bring on as investors and advisors, are accelerators, and you just got to figure out how to position them and fill the holes. So, we have design with Chris Davis. We have enterprise software with Doug Smith at Microsoft. We have, company building and major exit with Mike Davis. Same with John Wilmoth from an investor perspective. He brought us Mark Stevenson, who's a go-to-market expert, has had many exits at very large companies. He's in Silicon Valley. Brian Fox, and then there's several others. I'm sure I'm not mentioning. JP Blevins was an early angel investor.
Tim Igo.
Tim Igo's amazing. He came to us from Awesome Inc. He's up in DC. And so we meet with these people at least bi-weekly or monthly. Several of them are weekly. And it's super valuable. I mean, these people are way further ahead, very successful. And so everything we're saying we're struggling with, they've already experienced. And so, that's super important.
I have to tell a story about Brian Fox, just because it is kind of the embodiment of how great of a relationship builder he is. When I first met him, he's great with these like little gifts, and like it makes you think of him whenever you use his little gift. And the gift that he gave me was a pen, and I'm a big journaler, so like a pen was a perfect gift to give to somebody like me. And it was like made out of an old bourbon barrel stave, but it wasn't enough for him to just give me a pen. I had mentioned to him that I had a girlfriend, and he was like, "Oh, I'll get your girlfriend a pen too." And it's just like the most thoughtful little things like that. It's just a master class.
His car is like a driving gift shop, and he's got a bottle of bourbon that he takes. He's got like probably hundreds of bottles of bourbons in the back of his car.
Yeah.
And we show up to DC, and he's lugging in a bag full of bourbon bottles, and he's just he's like that classical salesperson that everybody likes. It's just he knows his enterprise sales well.
He deserves all the hype and all the shout outs here. All right, the next portion of this I want to get into is evolving the product through some of these design pilots that you've done. Before we start talking about how the product has evolved from working with those design pilots, are you guys able to share any of the companies or types of companies that you're working with, or kind of shed some light on the industries that you're in, anything like that can kind of
I'll talk industry. DoD was one of the early ones, engineering services firms that serve the aerospace and DoD community, large IT infrastructure, broadband. They're doing, both those groups are doing large RFPs. What are called managed service providers, which are IT firms that will come into an organization and manage all their IT. That's all RFP-driven. And then you have all these other services firms that bid on and win government work, whether it's manufacturing. We're focused on 3 ICPs right now. It's enterprise SaaS, IT, and engineering services firms. Those 3 are kind of where our existing customers lie. They have the pain point, they're willing to pay, and each of them in and of themselves are massive TAMs. one of the biggest challenges we've had early in the company as this industry of people that drive revenue through RFPs and RFQs is so big. Trillions and trillions of dollars of our economy flow through it every year, annually. The hard part has been trying to figure out who is best to target first. And I wouldn't even say we've perfectly found that yet, but those three ICPs are who we're trying to narrow it down between.
Right. So let's talk through bringing some of those pilots on board. So you set this up to where you had this initial idea, you built this product, you had discovered that RFPs was kind of a great beachhead to try and build a workflow and a solution around for this product that you guys had built. We can talk more about why it's a great beachhead, just all of this company data kind of coming into a product when you're trying to respond and create a proposal for an RFP. Talk about going, and you've been introduced to all these companies through your advisors. You're starting to kind of really hone in on what the problem is and how you guys are addressing it. I would love to hear from both your perspectives. One, from how you position the like how you did discovery, how you kind of did, because you're part selling, you're part just saying, here's an idea I'm trying to get feedback on, and then Ryan is taking what you're giving him, that feedback from those design pilots, and turning it into an actual product. And I think that is probably one of the single most important activities you can do at an early stage, and I feel like you guys have done it masterfully just from what I've observed. So can you talk about, just Evan, we'll start with you, and then I want to get pretty detailed with how you've done that as well, but just how you've positioned that as you've gotten these introductions, and how that has kind of evolved into, and then we'll get into Ryan's part.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just starts with, the original vision. And I think I'll take a moment to talk about this piece, but the original vision was, again, this concept of a decision room where businesses could go and collaborate with their internal data, each other, and now AI agents in a single, transparent, controllable environment. The core thesis was that chat was not going to be where all of the workflows take place, because it falls apart when you need to collaborate, it falls apart when you need transparency and auditability, and there's all kinds of other technical things that we can get into if we want. But we had that core thesis and vision. And the nice thing that we had going for us was every company was trying to figure out AI. It's just amazing how big of a movement this is, and it's warranted. But when you approach somebody and you had a background of being a founder, and they saw Ryan's background, and you say, hey, I would just like to talk to you about AI and this concept I have about how you can collaborate with it. People normally took the meeting. And when we told them our vision and our philosophy, which was, from a UI perspective, collaborative workflows are very different than chat. From an organizational perspective, you need to have these guardrails of a decision room to organize your business and have transparency, because if you have the AI models helping inform decisions and you don't have transparency into that, it's a major risk to the business. And then from a political standpoint, I think this is where Ryan and I connected at some point, early in the process, was all these businesses were making highly political decisions and letting their employees dictate political stances of a business. And that just cannot happen. And so Ryan and I connected on this concept of, if everybody has their own political opinion and they're going into AI chat, and they're all putting that political opinion or their bias into AI chat, and that chat is for the sake of progressing a business and doing business workflows and completing business projects, the leadership in that company has lost control of their business, because these models, they suck in all this context and they learn from it and they build on it, and then they retrieve it later. And so if you have all these people injecting their opinions in these non-transparent chats, it introduces major risk to a business. And so we just kind of laid out all of those things to companies, and everybody understood it because they were experiencing it. Everybody was using ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. So I say all that just because if you have the right vision and you lay out the right large pain points, even if they're not super specific and you might not be able to take early action, it'll at least get you the meeting. And then when you have that meeting, you just ask them where they're having pain points, you dig in, you do really great customer discovery, and eventually you're going to get some critical mass of interviews that leads you to the right opportunity. And so this is kind of where John Wilmoth came into the picture. Was when we approached him, it was just very wide as far as what the app could do. And by the time he made his investment, we had enough discovery that we really narrowed it down, because enough of the people we talked to, they might say, sales is where we'd like to use it most. We want to generate more revenue. And then we'd only go talk to salespeople. And then we're like, where can you use AI the most? What are your biggest pain points? And then some critical mass of them were like, I freaking hate writing proposals and responding to RFPs. And then when we had that, we were like, let's go deep here, see how deep we can get. And then it was like, wow, this is a massive opportunity. I had just done an RFP, if you remember, with Middletech.
Mm-hmm.
We had applied to that RFP for the state. I remember back to my Fuji days, like everything there was RFP-driven, even though it wasn't like formal government RFPs, it was still RFP-driven. So I'm like, yeah, this is a huge industry, very big pain point. And we just narrowed it from very wide vision and like theses on how AI should be used within companies. And then we just narrowed over hundreds of conversations and personal experience with RFPs. And we're like, this is definitely a very large market. So we validated the market, went to the investors and said, here's what we think. And then we did our first friends and family. So that's kind of the progression. But it's just hundreds of conversations, starting big, starting with really big problems and narrowing as quickly as possible.
And the last thing before I move on to Ryan, this is not like you're the very first company that's trying to build an AI solution to RFPs. Mm-hmm. And so you actually talked to a lot of people that were already trying to use a company that was addressing this problem with AI. And we'll dig into this more when we talk about how you guys are actually building the product. But I just want to make that point that you all had discovered a problem. People were trying to solve it already, but it was not being solved in a way that really made sense for how AI needed to be implemented into this workflow. So we'll get into that here in just a second. Ryan, you're working with Evan on this. Evan's doing all of these discovery calls. It's uncovering all of these pain points and problems. How do you go about building a product off the back of that? Is it just you kind of work alongside a designer like Luke and then you're sketching it out? We've got this whiteboard that's full of all sorts of drawings. Are you sketching it out on a whiteboard? Like, just kind of talk us through the translating from feedback from early customers to an actual piece of software, to actual product.
So when we first started talking, Evan had already kind of mocked up just a general idea, like in the abstract of what we would use. And it was in this, like, I think maybe even like the Simba branding colors, so like the green and yellow.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, let's try it out. We spun up a website or a web app kind of building on the principles of generally of what we talked about, had like a kind of working version of it, and then started iterating from there. So we had the general idea, and then, you know, as he's doing these calls, we were like sitting down, we'd meet up, sit in front of a whiteboard and basically just draw out ideas for all these different things. You know, we tried like website copy and marketing copy and sales emails and hiring candidate evaluation. We tried like probably 25 different things, like building up very simple versions, showing it to people, see how they reacted. And then eventually, after enough iterations, we came across RFPs, and we were like, this might be something. And really what struck with us was, I guess, that it aligned so well with the piece, like the building blocks that we had in place, that it became really clear, like, oh, this seemed really useful. And then when we started talking to more people in that space, because it seemed like we had a decent indicator, they were all like, oh yeah, this is a massive pain. No one's really solving it. And from our perspective, we were like, AI seems acutely good at these types of tasks, like taking a look at this 50-page document, understanding what it's asking, and then building a workflow based on that.
And let's dig in a little bit to like the competitive landscape of this. So tell me why somebody wouldn't be uploading an RFP to like a ChatGPT and trying to figure out, I'm sure you talked to people that were doing that, or even some of the products that might have raised, there's competitors that have raised millions and millions of dollars to do this, but from, as I understand how you guys have described it, it's like you have the document and then it's just like a co-pilot that's alongside of it. So kind of talk us through what the competitive landscape looked like, why the way that they were approaching it might not be aligned with the thesis that Valent has, and then let's get into kind of like the architecture behind how you guys are building this product.
Sure. Yeah, so I would say looking at the competitors in the environment going into it was kind of what maybe made us start much lower on the totem pole, I guess. The small marketing agency that, the CEO is trying to write a proposal and he needs help doing that, right? And so those were the people that were using ChatGPT, and we kind of quickly found out like they just don't have a big enough pain point. And so we kind of just kept trending up market further and further towards where we're at now, which is pretty solidly like probably just in enterprise now. Mm-hmm. But it was, what we found was that you kind of can use ChatGPT maybe at a low level if it's it doesn't require a lot of collaboration, and the smaller, maybe more straightforward RFPs. But there's a certain point where at scale it just becomes more and more difficult, and the pain point becomes more and more pronounced. And that's what we really started honing in on to dive deeper there.
And so let's talk through a little bit what the product looks like, feels like, behaves like in practice now. So you take your RFP, which can be tens, hundreds of pages long of information of the requirements of the project, of all this information that you have to respond to as a business. You put that into your else product. Take me from there. What happens?
So from there, the first major piece of the product, and probably still the primary core piece of it today, is an analysis feature, which is basically where we go in, we extract it all from whatever, whether it's a PDF or an Excel RFI or whatever it might be. And then we take it and have this really complex schema kind of behind the scenes that might consist of hundreds of prompts that we are industry specific, and we kind of iterate on those over and over and over to get to this final kind of super prompt that's stitched together of, like I said, hundreds. And then it kind of goes to this engine where it extracts all these things that you mentioned. So what's the timeline, so that I can find the due date, what are the requirements, what insurance policies might be required to do this. Is it do I need a small business qualification for it?
Timelines,
Yeah.
proposal sections that are needed. There's
Yeah.
a lot of this information that's just in these documents that
It's unstructured.
people are manually extracting. So the core problem that he kind of described it there is like this pipeline. That you're passing these very large documents back and forth. It's unstructured data. So an unstructured document is, a PDF or
And
a Word
unstructured
doc.
just means it's not like they're not data, like it's not tagged as this piece is this piece.
I'll
Does
let
that make sense?
Ryan, what's the best definition of unstructured?
Yeah. So unstructured, you think of like PDFs and text documents and recordings and all these sorts of things that you might have their files on your computer, but there's not really a way to gather insights from them in the same way that if you took the actual data points out of it. So you take, say, the requirements and what section is it in, and what type of requirement is it, and all these, basically, what are the properties of the data that you're looking at?
Yeah, like there's a data schema there that you can create, and that data schema gives it the structure for the whole system to understand what that object is. And so if it's just a straight, line of text or a paragraph, and it doesn't have any data attached to it that informs how it relates to other data points, then it's unstructured. And so a computer can't do anything with unstructured data until large language models. And so that's kind of the big moment in history that we're in our opinion, is large language models. Yeah, they're great at natural conversation and brainstorming and finding and connecting dots, but the big opportunity in our opinion at the enterprise level is taking all this unstructured data, which makes up 80+% of all of the data in a company, and then you run it through large language models, and now all of a sudden it's structured. And so when it's structured, you now can retrieve it at the moment it needs to be retrieved. You can generate insights on it. You can filter it. You can sort it. So the reason that that's important is that when you drop in that RFP, we structure that entire RFP into all the individual tiny building blocks of the RFP. Again, the requirements, the proposal sections, the timelines, the contacts, everything. And then when you're responding in the form of a proposal, and you're going through all of the requirements, and you need to see if I ever responded to this requirement, well, now you can't, because it's structured. Because when you structured the last requirement and the last RFP you responded to, we can just go retrieve it. So we kind of build this knowledge graph over time of the business. And then when you're writing the proposal section that needs, your personnel, and 3 RFPs ago you put in, relevant personnel that's just as relevant on this one as it was 3 times ago, we have that structured data to go, retrieve it again, and for you to find it and use it again, and for the AI to draft that section, in just a few seconds. And so you go from unstructured document to structured workflow to structured retrieval in just a few minutes, and then that proposal is much faster and easier to write. And then when you write that proposal, it just feeds back into the structured knowledge graph to be used again later.
Yeah.
And so we've built like this whole underlying platform, and Ryan mentioned like the crux of it is this really interesting data pipeline we've built that consists of hundreds of prompts that are all very well attuned to this workflow, that are verifiable, controllable and transparent for a business. And this is the difference between us and something like a ChatGPT, is if you throw an RFP into ChatGPT once and then somebody else on your team throws it in there, they're going to get two drastically different results. The thing with Valent is we have all of the prompts and all of the underlying schema and the platform built specifically to your business, and the prompts are tested, the workflow is structured and evaluated. So by the time you deploy it across your team, it's trusted and transparent, and you have the underlying control of the prompts in a no-code builder, and that's where like this platform play comes in. And the RFP use case is just the beachhead, but there's so many other workflows that come off the back of that project or that proposal that are just downstream that businesses need structured data for delivering on the project. So they might win the project, but now they've got all these resources and maybe personnel and manufacturing resources that they can deploy on this project, and we're structuring that data as well so they can have it all in a format that is usable. Again, unstructured data is not usable by computers until large language models, and so I think we had that insight really early, and the RFP use case is just a great beachhead.
Yeah, you're collecting a ton of business knowledge, business data, structuring it, and then allowing workflows, allowing it to be used by LLMs, allowing it to be useful. This
concept of like memory with large language models is one I think that is the biggest problem to solve going forward. I think AI agents and these reasoning models are going to be commoditized. And again, it just comes down to like how well formatted and structured is a company's data for the sake of, can the AI agents go retrieve it? And in order to retrieve it intelligently, it needs some form of structure. Well, the nice thing about an RFP is that one, the response to it in the form of a proposal is pretty well structured. It's unstructured data, but it's pretty well structured data. It's all of the project scope of work. It's how you meet all the requirements. It's how you meet all of the questions that are in the RFP. It's the personnel that you are going to use on that project. It's the case studies that you have won in the past and delivered successfully. All that data is just reused over and over again. And if we can intercept it early in the sales process in the form of the RFP, then downstream it becomes a very valuable form of memory for the AI to go retrieve for other workflows.
Yep. I want to dig into the platform side of this, because it's as you give this platform more information, more data, more knowledge about your business, it can improve. So as you run more RFPs through it, you give feedback on, okay, we won this RFP, or this part didn't go as we wanted it to. The product gets better and better. And I think that's a very significant thing when you think about this as a platform play, is you use a platform and it learns more about your business, it builds this knowledge base. Then, like you said, you can kind of take it further down the workflows of the business and the value that it's providing. And I want to talk about some of those use cases that you're kind of discovering right now. If you're able to talk about them, I'll just kind of tee it up and you can kind of take it where you want with it. I know one is like with reading bills. I mean, that's, I think, a really cool one. I know one is with like the number of personnel hours that could be put onto a project. So I'll let you decide what you want to kind of dig into there. But I think that makes a really good point about the platform play of this product and just how many different use cases and workflows it could be applied to.
I mean, the hardest thing about what we're doing right now from a product perspective is building an AI platform is very hard. I mean, it's like a research project. It's changing all the time. And, ChatGPT makes it look so easy. And ChatGPT is so good at so many things, but the second you need to go into something super niche, you realize how much infrastructure needs to be built. And then if you build that infrastructure, do our customers have the ability to customize that infrastructure to their unique needs? So when you go the platform route, it's very hard. And the hardest part about the platform is probably the user experience that you have to build out. So it's like you're doing something very niche, but you have all these platform features. How do you make sure that that niche use case is very clear and the user experience is easy to understand? And we're struggling and trying to figure out that piece. That's always a struggle for platform software providers. But from a platform perspective, when somebody learns how it works once, they can deduce how to use it for other things that are giving them struggles. And so the best use case that has happened that people are already paying us for is we might land with the RFP use case and they see how we're structuring data and they see how they drop in a proposal that's 100 pages and then all of a sudden they get 1,000 building blocks from that one RFP that are all the individual building blocks, and they're like, this is super interesting. And they start churning on how can we use this. Well, one of our customers, very large enterprise, doing engineering services, and so they, will win a project, and then they have all this personnel and engineers that they need to deploy on the project, and they need to deploy the most talented people for every project that have the best skill sets, the best experience for every project. It's a very hard problem. So they came to us and said, we just got this massive RFP. It's one of our largest customers. We would like to impress them and go through every one of these resumes. They gave us 550 resumes, and they said, can your app go through and structure all this data and tell us how much experience across all these resumes our company has with this client? That's a very hard problem, and it's impossible without reasoning models and AI, because as a human, those 500 resumes, you would get to a resume, you'd have to open it up, and you'd have to go and look at all of their lines of experience in their resumes. If they mentioned the customer that they're wanting to provide this information to, which informs that they have the experience, and then how many years or / months they have with each of those lines of experience. And then you separate them out, and then you add them up. That's how many years of experience they have. Like, even a human could not do that at scale 550 times, and it would, take them hundreds of hours.
Yep.
So they're like, we really want to turn this around for this client. We want to tell them how much experience we have. We know we have more than, we assume we have more than anybody else in the industry. We think this is going to win us the contract. By the way, can you also pull out their military experience, the military branch they were in, how many years of military experience, pull out the skill sets that we define for you. Here are the primary skill sets that we like to track, extract all this and structure it so we can get it in a tabular format and then reason over this. And we were like, yeah, this is a great use case. And they paid us for it, and we did it. It worked great. Went all the way to the top of the organization, and it took us 2 hours. And it took them, hundreds of hours, thousands of hours if they wanted to do it across all their resumes. They have, thousands of resumes. And so now we're moving towards an environment where they drop in every single resume that hits their entire company. And now all of a sudden they have structured data so that if they're bidding on a project, they say, here are the project properties and attributes. Go find me the best talent that matches this, and we have all the data structured to bring them the resources that they need. Yep. And that came off the back because when they, again, are bidding on an RFP, or they win an RFP, they then have to match the personnel. So that's just like a perfect example of our platform play allowed us to land and expand. But again, it's just very difficult in the early stages not to get too wide. So we have to be disciplined and just say, as long as it's directly tangible to the RFP and revenue generation process, we'll explore it at this point with the platform play. If not, we just have to stay focused. And that's like super hard as an early stage company and founders, because you want to do everything and follow the dollars. And these are big contracts. And so that's hard. But that's kind of how that played out.
We don't have to dig too deep into this because I know we're running up on time. We'll probably let you leave. You and I might keep talking since he has to head out. But one of the things, so you just called out, you did in 2 hours what potentially takes them hundreds of hours to do this process. And so the amount of value that you're able to provide with this new kind of paradigm of software, like the delta there is just massive. And so it's kind of changing the entire paradigm around how you price this type of software. It's no longer seats-based. You're now looking at it, and I've heard you talk about it, as digital labor, which, again, we don't have to get too deep into it because that's a whole rabbit hole we can go down, but I think it's a really interesting shift that we're going to see in the software space of how companies are billing. It's no longer how many people are using the software. You want as many people using your software as possible. You want to incentivize that. You want to be providing a ton of value on the digital labor that you're providing to them. I just think that's a really interesting aspect of
it's
what's going on right now.
Really, pricing AI products is really hard right now. It's totally different. It's not seats-based. It's digital. I mean, it's in a lot of ways digital labor. And so like that example, not only can we do it in a fraction of the time, like 99% time savings, but it's at a quality that a human can never do. For instance, like for a human to know every programming language that goes into very complex engineering schematics, a human is not going to know all of those programming languages to be able to go through every resume and say, this person has this experience, this person has that experience. It would take a genius. Well, good thing is these models and these reasoning models are geniuses, way smarter than a human. And so we can run this prompt and this structured output schema over all of these and get an output that a human could never dream of producing. So there's not only the time savings from a digital labor perspective, but the quality of the work that now our customer can do and deliver on is multiples potentially better from allocating the right resource at the right moment at the right price. And we're kind of giving them that data and opportunity to do that. And so how do you price that? We're still trying to figure that out. I mean, right now we're doing values-based pricing. So we're approaching these companies and we're just digging in and saying, if you did this manually today, what kind of resources would you throw at it? Is it worth those resources? And if it is, here's what we can do. We'll give it to you at a fraction of the price, which is still a large contract value, and you get unlimited usage.
Yep.
You don't have price per seats, and you get this, like, not necessarily unlimited usage, but to them it's unlimited usage.
It's crazy.
That's kind of how we're approaching it, and we're still trying to figure that out. But AI is, it totally changes pricing. It's either moving towards like just pure consumption based, which if you're in that market, it's probably going to move. That's more of commodities. Where we want to stay is this is very much value based, and we want to dig in, understand your workflows and pain points to the best of our ability, and then say, this is the price, and here's why it matters, and they align or they don't, and we can negotiate. But it's very much values based is how I would describe it. And then now we're trying to figure out onboarding and matching pricing to, okay, if it costs this much, then we better deliver. And so now we're trying to figure out, onboarding and what that looks like and how we bake that into pricing, because every company wants to adopt AI, and AI is still very new to everybody. And so we're not only having to train people on a new product, but how to use AI effectively with AI agents and AI chat. And most people have, no idea how to do that. And so it's just an onboarding challenge at scale for enterprises. And so we have to bake that into our pricing somehow so that they have success as early as possible.
Right. Well, I do want to call out, you've got 4 minutes here, Evan. It's 7:30. Evan's got to go to a client meeting right now, which, just to call out the kind of founder Evan is. I'm going to give you the option. You can take whichever one of these questions that you feel like you want to hit on. Either what would you tell somebody building an AI startup right now from your perspective as a founder? Or I know you've talked at one of our AI meetups about AI agents and feeling like they're not quite at the hype yet. So you can choose which one of those you want to go to, and then Ryan, you and I can talk about some of the broader picture stuff beyond just Valent.
Yeah, I mean, I think touching on the AI agent thing, like AI agents are very much moving into a real situation. Like, there's no question there are AI agents out there, doing great work, but they're much more in the consumer market. They're doing very generalized tasks. Where we're trying to take AI agents is in very mission critical enterprise environments that you can't be wrong. And that's very, very hard. There's a very different challenge than I'm going to build an AI agent that can output, code, and it can be wrong and we can iterate. In this situation, like if you miss something in an RFP, or you write something wrong in a proposal, or you extract something from, a resource that gets deployed on a project and it's wrong, at an enterprise level, that's unacceptable. And so the big challenge that we're giving ourselves and we're trying to work out with our customers is, what does agentic workflows look like in very mission critical revenue generating instances? And that is very, very hard, because it's, one, an infrastructure problem, but two, it has to be very repeatable and transparent and trusted. And that requires a very big infrastructure build out on the back end, because the more that you outsource to the models, the more risk it introduces. And I think our approach is, let's build the guardrails and let the models and the reasoning fill those guardrails, and our customers have control over what those guardrails are from the perspective of prompts and steps in the workflow, and so that they can build an agent once and then deploy it at scale across their business and know that they built it once, they trusted it, they evaluated it, and now it's doing mission critical work across the rest of the business. So there's just like a nuance between AI agents that you see on X and all the great demos you're seeing, whether it's Manus or ChatGPT or agents that'll build a website in one shot. Like, that's great. That's really great for consumers. But at enterprise, like, doesn't scale. Like, it's just not acceptable. And the margin for error is one that we have to pay close attention to. And so that is our approach to AI agents. And the big difference is we're trying to piece together these building blocks in this infrastructure so that when we get it right, it can be scaled in a trustable, transparent way. It grows. It's a very big opportunity, not only for our customers, but us, and going after the market. And I'm not sure from what I can tell, anybody in the market that we're going after has built an agent that is doing, significant amount of this workflow yet. They're all doing pieces, and I think what we've built is this underlying platform and very configurable no-code builder that allows all of our customers to build their own agents in a very trusted manner. So I think that's my approach to AI agents, and these models are great. They are becoming very agentic, but at a very niche, mission-critical level, they cannot be trusted.
Yeah.
And I don't think anytime soon they will be trusted. And that's where SaaS comes in. Like there'll always, I think, be some layer of SaaS that is the channel in which these reasoning and very powerful models are
Corralled.
distributed through.
Yeah.
OpenAI is building insane tech. I mean, it's just, you can't even fathom and describe well the technology they're building. And our job is just to build the SaaS that channels it in the right way at the right moment for the right pain point and distribute that as widely as possible.
All right, Ryan, there's a few more topics I wanted to hit on. Just a few more about the product maybe, and I think you'd be kind of the person to talk to about this. One, I think a lot of people are going to ask, kind of to Evan's point, is being able to trust AI with like mission critical workflows, processes, results that, it makes a difference between, yes, revenue, but sometimes even more important things than revenue. And so let's talk a little bit about, I'm sure you guys hear a lot about security and about how you can kind of build trust in those platforms. Can you just kind of speak to like the security side of this and kind of what you're telling clients when they pose that question and they're worried about those sorts of things, because they're giving so much data to these AI models? Like, how do you account for that? How do you say, or I guess make them feel better about that side of things?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people really tried to jump straight to the, LLMs are going to continue to accelerate, and we're going to reach this point of AGI where we have these super intelligent models, and they're capable of anything, and we don't have to care about those things. But from our product's perspective, we've always kind of kept at a center of it the idea of the human in the loop. So when we propose this, it's never like this is going to fully replace your employees, or this is going to make critical business decisions for you. It's always been, this is here to augment you, make you more efficient, and help you do things that you weren't capable of before. But we wouldn't really trust those critical decisions to the AI purely. The person of agency in the situation is always going to be a human at some level.
And that goes back to like accountability. And auditability, which is super important for the business. It's like you can't just point at the AI and be like, oh, it's the AI's fault we lost that contract.
Exactly.
Keeping a human in the loop allows there to kind of have that accountability. And that's where, like, as we were talking about, the platform kind of breaks down all the different requirements. You can now assign those requirements to different people whose areas of expertise there is, and then you have that like audit trail of how did we get to this point. It's like, oh, well, it was assigned to that person. They're the one that worked with the AI to give that response, which I think is a critical piece of this entire thing. But you brought up a point there of just like getting to AGI and like automating all this stuff away. And I think it's just a huge topic right now that everyone's really worried about. We're going to just see so much job displacement. And this is definitely a product that is saving so much actual man hours. It's like, I think it's a legitimate concern. So we can kind of take this part of it whatever direction you want. But I mean, where do you fall in that camp? Is this something that is going to replace a lot of people? Is it something that's going to make the existing employees just that much more efficient? Or new entrants into the job market going to be displaced? I mean, like, let's just kind of dive into that side of things.
If I were evaluating myself, I would say I'm highly optimistic, super bullish about it. But on the full spectrum of how wild AI enthusiasts are, they would probably consider me like a Luddite. Like I'm just, because I'm not, I guess, all in on the AGI super intelligence. Like, to me, it feels more like, I guess I would say I align probably closest to like Satya at Microsoft, who talked about it as not like some AGI endgame where white collar work entirely is just eliminated because the models get so good, but more that something like maybe we become like 10% better across the entire economy, which is still tens of trillions of dollars, right? Which is insane to think about, even just that type of enhancement. And that's like completely untapped, it feels like. Like there's probably 20 years of development, say, and just what can we do with models now? Like they arrive so quickly, and people are still figuring out how to even build effectively with them. And even that is still in the very, very early stages. But I feel like as people get better at that, we develop, it took a really long time just to get software development down, really, right? Like it took probably 20 years just to develop fundamental processes around how do you even coordinate humans to build software. And now this version of software is, it's not deterministic like old software. There's so many new things that have to be figured out that we've not even scratched the surface of what we could build with it.
We're in the early days for sure. And just to kind of speak from the non-technical side, I do think it's about to be a golden age for building products, building businesses. Doesn't even have to be a software business, but just generally building businesses. And I just want, as a non-technical entrepreneur, to talk a little bit about how I'm using it. So as people who follow the middle tech know, I've gone full time into the brand. I don't think I could operate at the capacity I'm operating right now without AI. I'll give a good example. On the DevelopLex side of things, we just went on Commerce Lexington's leadership visit to Madison, Wisconsin. So we helped create a lot of the content from that visit and try and bring some of the learnings back from all the leaders that went to Madison. What did they learn from Madison's leaders? We captured content about it. Now we can share it with our audience that cares about that sort of stuff. We came up with that idea last December. The first thing that I did was I went to AI and I said, hey, I have this idea. I want you to help me flesh this out and get it in a format that I can present it to Commerce Lexington. So it gives me a one-pager on it. We tweak a few things. I hop on a call with Commerce Lexington. I say, I have this idea. I present them this one-pager, send it over to them, get feedback on the call, record the whole call, get the transcript, go back to the chat where I came up with the first thing, say, hey, here's the feedback that Commerce Lexington gave me, get the second iteration of it, send it over to them. They're like, yeah, that's great. Let's go forward with it. Give that back to AI. Then I go back and say, okay, now I need an execution plan to actually deliver on what I've presented to them in this proposal. Lays out everything for me. And then when it comes to actually piecing together the final video, transcripts of all of the sessions that we recorded into AI, it has context on it. It's just that's just a small example. I'm using it in every single workflow that I can possibly find to do it. And the thing that's crazy is as my instance of ChatGPT, which I wish I was building the entire thing on Urals so that I could be more collaborative with it because it's all siloed in my one ChatGPT account, but it has so much freaking context on Middle Tech and on DevelopLex and on our mission, everything down from the tone of voice I like to use on our content for both podcasts and social content, all the way up to the strategic, where am I trying to take this in 5 to 10 years? And it is such a powerful thing to be kind of building alongside with it. And I know you see that from the technical side, getting to build alongside Cursor and stuff like that.
Yeah. Those are the things that I would say get me the most excited.
Yeah.
Is how much you can accelerate the work of an individual or a small team.
Yeah.
To effectively perform what entire giant corporations were doing before.
Do you buy into the story of the first $1 billion company will be built soon? Do you think that that's realistic, or is that BS?
I think it's possible. Yeah. I think it is now within reach. Yeah. I have no idea what it would be, but but I mean, just from a software perspective, the enablement that you have now with traditional AI systems, you might have to have a team of dozens of PhDs and tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to build these big tech AI systems, and now you can just be a guy with a computer and ChatGPT, and in a few minutes you can have a classification system if you can write a prompt.
Yeah, dude.
How much it enables just the average person, I just can't be understated. Yeah,
you've got a PhD level intelligence at your fingertips that you can direct in whatever way that you want. It's pretty insane. Let's go even further into the future as we kind of wrap this up, and then this will kind of be the last section here. But just long-term future, what all's coming down the pipe? So as you think about the different technologies that are kind of being enabled by this revolution with LLMs, you've got things like self-driving. We're seeing Waymo has, I think, overtaken Lyft in San Francisco, I'm pretty sure, and it's on its way to eclipsing Uber, and they're expanding to all these new cities. Self-driving is here at a smaller scale, but I think it's one of those things. It's gradually, then all at once. So we've got self-driving coming down the pipe. We've got robotics. We've got shifting dynamics in software, which you kind of talked about, going from deterministic to this kind of different thing. Let's start with self-driving. I mean, the world feels like it's about to change a significant amount in a really short amount of time. As somebody who understands the technology, what would you say to somebody who might not be as technical, just about the speed, the speed of change that is about to happen? What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's another one where, similar to the LLM situation, I had basically a giant epiphany of like, oh, these are probably pretty good at like assisted driving and stuff. And then I rode in a FSD Tesla, and I was like, oh man, like this is a different world. Like, I mean, it's another thing where it's like seems like no progress, and then all at once, I feel like it's just going to rapidly change. And when you see things like the new line of Teslas that don't even have like the driver's seat in them because they're going to be built autonomous first. I think once those things start to arrive, it's going to just be an absolute game changer.
It's going to feel like the future.
Yeah.
I feel like, and so maybe as a developer and somebody that understands this technology better than I do, help me flesh out this thesis or this like what thing that I've been saying recently, which is these LLMs, like the way that these LLMs work, using transformers to intake just a shit ton of data and basically be able to make sense of that data and learn from that data. That we've essentially, as I understand it, kind of built the brain of the machine, whether that's self-driving, whether that's robotics. And so what I feel like is about to catch people off guard is we've built this technology that if we can drop that into, let's move on to robotics for a second, we can drop that into a robot that not only has all of the benefit of all of the training that has happened off all of the data that's on the internet, but now is able to collect physical real world data. And now we're even seeing that it can be trained off of videos of humans doing things and videos captured by humans. I think what's about to happen is the robotics revolution is going to get here a hell of a lot quicker than most people would expect it. And we're going to see humanoid robots walking around much, much sooner than I think people were predicting. Is that an unreasonable prediction, or am I understanding how the technology works and how it could be implemented in robotics properly?
No, I actually completely agree. So I feel like if we're still early stages of the digital version of LLMs and this new wave of AI, I think we're just barely even scratching the surface of what it looks like when we move from the digital world and bits into atoms. And now, how can we transform the real world using this technology?
Yeah.
And starting in the digital world, you can iterate so much faster, right? There's so much more capacity for that. And now there's so many lessons learned that are just going to make it the adoption into the real world that much faster.
Yeah.
And yeah, when you see companies like, is it Figure, the other robotic company, and like
I follow that one closely.
there's just decades of advancement are just happening in like months now.
Yeah, and you see NVIDIA is creating these models that it can just like have all of this training data, all of these videos to try and like run these simulations of like factories, for example, and it just like condenses it into this very quick thing. And it feels like the acceleration of the takeoff is going to be like extremely fast. Want to make sure, are you good on time? Are you good on time? Are we good? If
I'm
we
fine.
keep everyone good? I'm having fun with this conversation. So there's more stuff I want to talk about. Another topic. This is a little bit dystopian, but something that Evan and I were talking about the other night. I'd like to hear your take on it. This is actually super relevant right now because we just saw the massive drone attack that Ukraine did in Russia and took out, they're saying like 40 of their planes. I think it's probably not quite that many, but they inflicted serious damage on Russia deep within Russian territory, and they did it with drones. And they did it with drones, as I understand it, that were trained on the bomber planes that they destroyed. And it didn't matter if the Russians could jam those signals because they were kind of flying autonomously at that point. They could identify the plane and fly into the plane and explode and damage the plane. And it makes you think about what is warfare going to look like in the future. And one of the topics that Evan and I were talking about is if it's gotten to the point where war is kind of asymmetric now and you can destroy a $100 million plane with a $5,000 drone, probably even less expensive than that, that just totally throws off the equation of war to where it no longer makes sense to have manned aircraft, and it's just going to be like one manned aircraft with 100 drones that like there's like kind of one leader, and then all these drones are kind of doing all this stuff. And then eventually it gets to the point where AI is able to control more and more of the process and make more and more of the decisions as you kind of go further along. And then it seems like the point that you would eventually get to is it's a race to which country can produce the most autonomous robots that we throw at each other. Like you're essentially just throwing drones at each other nonstop. You're destroying each other's machines, which you would think would incentivize countries to basically just mass produce these robots, drones, robotics, whatever it is, that have AI built into them. And that seems risky. That seems scary to me. That's
yeah.
the rabbit hole we were going down, and you can take that wherever you want. But that's what we were talking about the other night.
Terrifying, but especially
That
when you
seems like
consider
how Terminator comes to life.
like when you consider like how far America's economy has shifted to the digital economy and emphasize that.
Yeah.
And then you have countries like China that have really gone all in on the manufacturing side of things. It's really interesting to think about what happens there. Fortunately, I think it's getting a lot of attention now over the past 5 years or so, and I think companies like the Palantirs and Andurils and stuff have made it like cool again, and it's attracted a lot of VC money, and it really opened the playing field to even make it competitive to bring smart people and resources in to actually try to fix these problems. And so it feels like now there's a lot of momentum in a positive direction in the United States for rebuilding that infrastructure, and particularly in defense.
And yes, and people might hear that and get scared or be upset that the U.S. is trying to do that. But I think to connect the dots here and talk about like why is that important? Do we want China to be the first one to do that? Like, do we want an adversary to be the ones that have that capability and we don't, that have the manufacturing capability, just from an energy perspective, to be able to train these models and produce at such a high scale? Like, take your pick. It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
It's going to be in someone's control.
It's going to be in somebody's control. I would hope that it's in America's, or at least America can balance the scales a little bit. And I mean, that relates everything to what Evan and I have been talking a lot about with just scaling up the power production of America. You're seeing, I think it's been 4 years now that I've been saying, like, why aren't we producing more nuclear? Everyone's been saying that. Yeah. Anybody that like understands nuclear and like how energy is generated is like, why aren't we building more nuclear? And finally, the AI revolution has given us a reason to be like, all right, we have a reason to start building new nuclear. And you've seen like Trump's executive orders to really like put some focus on that. Let's end on a positive note though, with like what you're most excited about for this future that might be coming up very quickly, where we have self-driving and we have robotics and we have all these things. I'll just kind of rattle off a few that come to mind for me. I'm pumped to be able to load all my friends into like a autonomous like Tesla bus, and it's going to have like recliner seats and like an awesome sound system. And I'm going to be like, yeah, let's like take this thing down to Florida for the weekend. And we sleep the whole time. We're jamming music the whole time. And it costs us $100 or less to take it all the way down to Florida. And I'm a big traveler. So like the idea of mobility, like really falling and getting more comfortable and more convenient is really exciting to me. That's just one that comes to mind. What's something that pops into your head when you think of the future?
I don't have a great. That's a really interesting one. I think like especially when you consider like the layout that Tesla's kind of proposed of
what
like,
they're trying to do.
Yeah, you have this. You buy a car and then you maybe only use it like 1% of your time, but the rest of the time it could be used by other people. And then commoditization of even like the ownership of vehicles then becomes. If you look at like city congestion and all of these things, travel becomes that much more affordable and approachable and convenient even. But outside of that, I would say the robotics and all the different applications of that feels again like this thing that was so challenging before. Now it's all happening at once, and I think it's going to get really interesting how people and companies are able to start applying those things.
Yeah. All right. The last thing I'll say, I was listening to a podcast. Let me grab my phone here. I was listening to a podcast with Simon Sinek. It was on Diary of a CEO. I'd recommend going and checking this podcast out if you're listening to this. I think you'd enjoy it. But I wrote a couple notes down about like dealing with this future where AI is a thing, because Simon Sinek made a great point. He was like, AI is almost going to allow us to like skip the journey and like just get to the results. Like you ask AI to generate a book for you, but you didn't have to go through all the toil of like creating a book, which is where the actual value of creating a book comes from. And so I wrote down a few things that we can just kind of end it here. I'd love to just hear what you think of some of this stuff, if I can find it. I just said, yeah, okay. So the world is changing, and it's like, what should you focus on now in this changing world where like work is changing and knowledge is changing? I say focus on friends and family, so love broadly. Focus on things that make you feel alive, so like art, meaningful work, travel, human creation kind of falls into that as well, comedy, books, music. And I'm saying like let AI help you amplify those things. So like when I'm saying I'm using AI to like make myself more efficient, more effective, I'm not trying to have AI produce necessarily the final output for me, but I'm trying to help me just accelerate through the process to where I'm learning a lot quicker. I say don't let AI replace the things or steal the journey from you. I think that's kind of what I took away from that podcast and what I think is a good piece of advice for people right now.
I love it. Yeah. But for as much of a technologist as I would consider myself, like I would say I'm a humanist first.
Yes.
And
Flourishing first.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much of the conversation is, how the AI is going to own us and the AI future, but I feel like, it's humans first. It's a tool for us that we control and use to our benefit.
Yeah, 100%. All right. Well, to wrap things up here, I know I've said that 3 times. How can listeners support or get involved with Valent? I know, let's make a plug for the founding AE position you guys are doing. Mm-hmm. Any others that come to mind, we can kind of ping pong back and forth and make sure we cover everything.
Yeah. That's the immediate thing. So Evan's been crushing it on the sales side, but he's just, worked himself into, not having the capacity to keep going. So we're looking for kind of the first go-to-market hire to help us really on all sales fronts there. That'd be the top one right now.
And then if somebody has a connection that they might think is valuable, can we help? Evan kind of said the ICP of like enterprise SaaS, engineered services, IT. If somebody knows somebody in that space and like maybe they might find value in Valent, send them this episode. The website is getvalent.com.
Yep.
Connect with Ryan and Evan on LinkedIn. They're easy to find. Good thought leaders on AI. I think that's all I can think of for now.
Awesome.
So awesome. Ryan, thanks so much. Evan, thank you. I hope you're landing new revenue for the company as we speak. It's been a really fun conversation and super excited for you guys.
Yeah, it's been great. Good talking to you.